They can send the child home with services or support, which is good. If it's a minor infraction, if it's something, especially in our neglect cases, neglect is so closely tied to poverty. It's such a fine line between, are they not caring for their kids, or do they lack the resources to care for their kids? So perhaps instead of going so far as to remove those children from that home, what if we put some support services in place and let them stay there and just strengthen that family enough that that child will be okay, right? So in those cases, we would hope that they would make the decision to keep the child home with supervision and services. Let's see, if we give this family some supports, we'll watch the situation, maybe we don't have to get further involved. Or they can say, this is really bad, and I don't think it's safe. I think this child is in imminent danger, physical danger, and so they will say, I recommend that they're removed from the home. If that's the case, they have to pick up the phone and call a judge. A child investigation worker can't just swoop in and take a kid without first getting an order from a judge. It's kind of important. So they call whoever is on duty. It could be 1 a.m., it could be 1 o'clock in the afternoon, it could be whatever, and they call the judge and they verbally say, this is what I've seen, this is what I've done, we've tried this, because perhaps they've been this person, the child has been in the home with support services, and we've tried like 3 or 4 or 5 things and they haven't worked. Okay, now I think it rises to the level that we need to remove the child. So they need to give a little bit of that story to the judge and explain why they feel it's important to remove the child right now. And if the judge agrees with them verbally over the phone, that's as much evidence as you have, is the voice of the investigator, the judge will say, yes, remove the child. Then the child will be taken right then and there from the home. Now, you very quickly actually have to have a court proceeding because this child is obviously in limbo, right? And so what we have is a preliminary protective hearing, or really what we call a hold order. The judge has given that verbal order to hold the child in state custody, and so now we've got 3 days max. Usually it's the next day, depending on weekends and whatnot. We have 3 days max to show up in court and actually have a for real hearing, not a telephone call, about what happened and what transpired and why that investigator felt it was important to remove the child. So, ideally, what happens at this point is the state physically gives a report that mimics exactly what was said on the telephone, and the judge says, okay, yes, that's exactly what I heard, I still think it's enough. Not always the case. Sometimes it doesn't even get to this point. Sometimes the DA throws the case out. Sometimes the state just doesn't have it all together. Sometimes a parent comes at this point. So there's a few things that can happen here. The court can just send the child home without services. A very common reason that this would happen is if a child comes in for what's called dependency. So they're not alleging abuse or neglect. They're saying it's a dependent child, it's a child under 18, and there was no grown-up to take care of them. Can anybody think of a common way that this might happen that would resolve itself within a few days?
If a parent is in a hospital, a single parent?
Yes, that could happen. More commonly, a parent gets arrested for something not child-related. Obviously, if the parent is arrested for beating their child, that would be a completely different story. But say they get picked up on a traffic charge or a drug charge or something that's not related to parenting. If they get arrested and go to jail and there's nobody to take care of that child by necessity is not going to be left home alone. The child is going to have to come in and care. But if the parent makes bail before the 3 days later hearing, and the parent is physically present in the courtroom and says, I can take my kid back now, there is no reason to keep that child in care. The reason for them to come in, if it was listed as dependency, and you now have that parent physically there saying, I can take the kid back, there's no reason to take the child anymore. So the child would just return home to the parent in that case. The next thing that can happen is that the judge decides to send the child home with services. So the judge says, DCFS, I agree with you, it's a little fishy over there, but I really think there was more that you could do to keep the child in the home. I don't think you tried hard enough to put services in place. I don't think you did enough. Sending the child home with services and having them, just monitor. Or the court can say that the child, you're right, everything you said on the phone, I see again here, I have the evidence I need, and I'm gonna order that child to be removed from their home. And those are the judge's choices. At that point, if the judge makes the determination that the child should be removed from the home, a bunch of things happen. The child gets a social worker with DCFS, so we've now left behind the investigators. They're no longer part of this, they're done. They've already investigated, they brought enough, the judge said it was enough, it is now in care. So now you have a different social worker, you have a foster care social worker. This is when a child gets an attorney, and this is also when CASA is appointed. So we don't really have any control over what happens before that initial court date. So if people think that we're taking over from the courts, we're not, I promise. We have no control over that besides being mandatory reporters. But once the judge has made that determination, okay, I agree with you, it's egregious enough, let's keep the child in care, that's when they appoint a CASA. Depending on the case, depending on the timing, depending on a whole bunch of things, we may have a CASA volunteer physically present then, but usually what happens is we have a staff member there, and then they'll come back to the office and say, you know, hold order came in today, the child's in care, we need to put a CASA on it. And then we'll assign a CASA before the next year. Any questions about that and how a child comes into care? No?
How are you a mandatory reporter, like that doesn't break any confidentiality things, like client confidentiality? Like if I came to you and I was your client, I was like, be really sometimes, but only when, you know, on Sundays.
Well, attorneys aren't mandatory reporters, teachers are. Yes, so as a teacher, you're a mandatory reporter. Yeah, there is attorney-client privilege. I would say most attorneys, if they know that a child is being, I mean, you can tell me what you would do if she told you that she's beating her child regularly, but, you know.
Well, what I would hope that wouldn't happen. Yeah, but one of the things that, I mean, honestly looking at it, if you told me that you were, I don't actually know that it's really happening, you know, I mean, that's the way I look at it. Honestly, I have people tell me things all the time that might not exactly be true, you know? So I would, you know, I mean, I would talk to you about it, and I would then let you know that I would feel obliged to report it if I knew that this was actually happening, or if anything else happened, I would report it. So I would tell you that I would report it if something happened.
Another thing that's good to know is that you can report anonymously. So I've heard several people say, like, I wouldn't be comfortable telling somebody that I'm going to report on them, but if I'm uncomfortable enough in that situation, I'll report it anonymously, and I'll just let the state deal with it. Like, I'm not going to get more involved with that, and you know, I'm okay with that.
They don't have to tell you
No, absolutely. Even if as a mandatory reporter, I identify myself, that information is supposed to be the most protected information in all of these court proceedings. My name is supposed to be redacted from every single document, from every single everything. CASAs don't even know for sure who reported on their cases, and we're privy to all aspects of the kid's case. But that's considered confidential for that person. Like, we have aspects of the kid's case, but that's their confidential information. That's not the child's confidential information. Oftentimes we can guess, especially if we go to school and we talk to the teacher, and the teacher's like, heck yeah, I moved in, this is what I saw. But that's up to them to disclose that they're the person who made the report. That information is not supposed to be anywhere. Parents are not supposed to know, the child is not supposed to know, the CASA is supposed to know. No one is supposed to know who made that phone call, whether you say who you are or not. Yeah.
So how does mandatory reporting work insofar as, do I have to be this kid's teacher, or am I just like a teacher who goes to this kid's church?
Yep.
Or something?
Then you're still a mandatory reporter. I could be walking through Walmart and I'm still a mandatory reporter. Yeah, absolutely, yes.
You have to be a teacher.
No, there's a whole list. I mean, seriously, we have classes on mandatory reporting that we offer to our CASAs. So if you're interested, I would look up some information about that and all of the ins and outs and the rules of it. But yes, there's a list of mandatory reporters in the state of Louisiana. And you are a mandatory reporter, no matter where you are, no matter what you're doing. You can be at a bar, you can be at church, you can be at school, you can be at home, and a mandatory reporter is still a mandatory reporter.
So like if you see someone like beating their kid in Walmart, you would have to phone it
I would have to
in.
put it in. Yes.
But how do you want to report if you don't know the
Well, I mean, reports are kind of different no matter what. I mean, kind of think of Crime Stoppers. Like, some people call Crime Stoppers and they can give like the whole entire description of what happened and they saw everything. Other people call Crime Stoppers and said, you know, I overheard so-and-so talking about something, I don't really know, but I think this might be a lead. I mean, it's the same sort of thing when it comes to reporting suspicions of child abuse. Some people might be able to really give a detailed explanation and say, I witnessed this, this, and this, here's the person, here's their name, here's where they live, I happen to know their home right now, here's all the details. And for other folks, yeah, it's literally, I was just in Walmart, this is what the mom looks like, this is what the kid looks like, you know, just want to let you know. But yes, I have to report that. Did you have a question?
I just had a question, when you remove the children from the home, what kind of law enforcement?
They can, yes. It kind of depends on the situation, but they absolutely are able to phone NOPD and say, and sometimes it's the opposite. Sometimes NOPD calls DCFS and says, hey, we're arresting this person and there's a bunch of kids here. You need to come get them. So it goes both directions. Sometimes DCFS calls NOPD, sometimes NOPD calls DCFS. Whatever the situation calls for, but yes, they can absolutely get back. And their rules are the same as our rules for our CASA. If you feel safe, get the unsafe, get the heck out, and then we'll sort of, you know, regroup again from there. Their safety is incredibly important. Our CASA safety is incredibly important.
What if they're like